Yeah.
Got a friend.
Sure,
Good.
cut him.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Andy Schildhorn. I live at 22895 Sales Avenue. We're here this evening to represent the following community associations from within the Township of Langley. That would be the Aldergrove Community Association, the Brookswood Fernridge Community Association, the Fort Langley Community Association, the Milner Community Association, the Willoughby Residents Association, and the Murrayville Community Residents. We, the Township of Langley Community Associations, have a direct reach from 15 to 20,000 residents from all points of the township. Langley is a growing, diverse community with ever-changing demographics. Taking the initiative, we gathered together our fellow community associations to discuss our mandates. We also compared hot topic issues within each area represented. We found great commonality. We are all volunteers. We all want to serve our community with the following in mind. We work alongside residents and the township to preserve the special character and quality of life in our community. We work with and support the activities of community organizations, other resident groups, local businesses, business associations, and government. We encourage cultural, recreational, social, and environmental endeavors within our communities. We participate in the beautification of our communities, and we organize resident meetings to allow a forum for discussion and to inform residents of issues of importance. And we maintain websites, Facebook pages, along with other social media sites to keep the community informed and to offer a meeting place online for discussion. As volunteer community groups, we believe we contribute greatly within our involvement and presence within the township. The Fort Langley Community Association actively engages within our community by conducting monthly meetings, direct mail to our members, listening to Fort Langley social media and our Facebook page. Information gathered from these sources forms the questions for our yearly survey. Sidewalks on 96th Avenue consistently came up as a top priority, which we were able to support Council's decision to install them, and thank you for that. Township planning staff asks us for comment on development applications. We in turn invite the developer to our meetings for a presentation. Comments are then reported back to staff and included in the package to Mayor and Council. We all believe our work offers many benefits not only to residents but also to staff and Council. We are ready and willing to act as a communication conduit as needed and have done so in the past. Amy Morose will now speak on behalf of the Brookswood Fernridge Community Association.
So as Andy said, my name is Amy Morose. I live at 3431 199th Street in Brookswood, and I'm a director for the Brookswood Fernridge Community Association. Our community association was registered as a nonprofit society in November 2016. Our mission is to work alongside residents and the township to preserve the special character and quality of life in our community. As a non-political community association, our goal is to act as a communications link between Township of Langley staff, council, and the community at large, as well as representing community interests and concerns to Township of Langley staff and council members. A great example of this is that Township staff sent the BFCA the information about the Social Sustainability Task Force. We sent that information out to our members by email, as well as posting it on our Facebook page, and other community associations did the same. The community associations in Langley can be a great resource for the township. Our fledgling association worked extremely hard to garner support for the 2017 draft OCP, and also to get modifications which were in the best interests of our community. We met with every willing council member in order to garner support for our amendments and to try to get council support for this OCP. We spent many hours with long-range planning staff to ensure what we were asking was acceptable with them as well. We have also spent much time trying to protect the vulnerable Brookswood Aquifer and the air quality of South Langley by opposing the emissions permits sought by Weir Canada and EBCO Metal Finishing through Metro Vancouver. These firms are located in the Campbell Heights Business Park in South Surrey, but their emissions will have a direct impact on Brookswood Fernridge. I'll turn it back to Andy.
Oh, okay. So now I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Barb Sharp. We approached Barb to do a review collectively on our behalf and add further comment on the importance of community associations and their needs moving forward. Barb has many years in municipal politics as a councillor and then mayor of the city of North Vancouver. She has a master's in conflict analysis and management along with a provincial instructor's diploma. She was also chosen by this mayor and council to sit on the mayor's standing committee for public engagement, which led to the township's public engagement charter. So I thank you for your time, and we'll be available for questions afterwards.
So just Do you want questions? There is someone who wants to ask a question now. Do you want Barb to speak first?
Yeah, I think Barb should speak first.
And then have questions to?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll allow that. That's fine. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Barb Sharp, welcome.
Hi, welcome to you
If you
too.
could give us your address and.
My name's Barbara Sharp and I live at 26881 26A Avenue. And I just want to get this up. Where's the, no, that didn't work. Get this on, down here. I'm not usually left-handed, so come on. Okay. Can I put it up here?
Just press F5, I think.
I know, I'm just trying, it's a little faster than what I'm used to. Now it should go with this thing down here. Why doesn't that work? Is that it? Nope.
No.
Where's
You can go to slideshow at the
where's
top.
You want to click on this little guy here.
This guy here? Okay, perfect, thanks. Okay, there we go. Okay, good evening, Your Worship and Council members. I'm happy to be here to present on behalf of the Township of Langley Community Associations, also because this is an incredibly profound example of community coming together, that these associations have actually been able to link up with each other and start actually communicating as individual teams throughout your own community. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it before. So I took some pictures of the different ones. I took the pleasure of this one, since I live in Aldergrove, to put my Clio in the field at Jackson Wetlands. So that's my Clio, that's Jackson Wetlands. And of course there's Willoughby, there's Brookswood, Fort Langley. I like Christmas, so obviously, so I put Christmas there, and Murrayville. So what is the township? I'm here to talk about the grants. 2015, you modified some of the criteria because the community associations were able to obtain the grants under the community grants for $2,500 previously, and for some reason that has been dropped off of the new grant process that you put into place. So we're not entirely sure what happened with that, because there's lots of reasons to still provide that to these groups. So there's some things to consider. Possibly renewing the current grant application criteria. There's the public engagement process, of which I was part of, a review of what value is added by these people in these community associations. There's merging the TOL grants and the public inclusivity and engagement process. So the current grant criteria has a certain amount of conditions to it, things like must be a minimum of 250 township residents. So I know you can read your script up there on your own, and pursue other areas, have volunteer effort, they clearly have that, submit a copy of AGM minutes, all of these things involving local residents, those are all there for these community associations already. These are all things that currently exist under your new grant process. So the clear purpose of the program is to enhance the quality of life of your residents. Of course you want to do that, you're representing them. So for them, the only possible grant that they can apply for, which is awarded annually to nonprofit groups, is the community one. So this grant has been refined to currently exclude it, as I've said. So the township states that they're committed to involving residents in civic affairs and community life and supporting the work of nonprofit groups. All of these community associations are officially now nonprofit groups registered under the Societies Act. So they are all clearly making that point in their applications to you for funding. And you have made super great strides as a member, as council members and mayor, towards involving your citizens here in that public engagement process. I've given you a report as well that you can take away and read at your pleasure about where I connect some of the dots on the public engagement process and this community residents associations group. So the whole process is to, engage the citizens. Well, you have a lot of engaged citizens already, and it's really worth your while to use these engaged citizens to your advantage for information, for exchange of ideas, for what's happening in their particular communities, and utilize those services. And so that's one of the reasons why the grant process should be approved. So in politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. Right? And for sure, we all know that's true, right? When we're making decisions, there's always been some planning in front of it. And clearly, there's been some planning in front of this. Aspirations and goals to inform, consult, involve, collaborate, empower. This is what council has stated they want. And these community groups, all in the association, want it as well. So we want to move forward in that spirit by creating, representing the opinions of residents within their areas, running regular meetings, running annual surveys, focusing on important issues, holding informational meetings, a whole host of things that these groups already do, that they do everything that grant criteria indicates is important to you as members of council. So we can make your job a lot easier by continuing to provide that good information. We do many events and projects in these community associations, so we could put it under project. However, we want to be, as you heard, you're on the ground, you're conduit to the residents as far as an association is concerned, and have that meaningful community consultation. So, in closing, I am suggesting that we think a win-win here. It's not you or me, it's both of us that, counts in all of this. And I think a slight modification to your current grant process, and I've actually put a recommendation at the back of the report that suggests the Township of Langley Community Associations requests Mayor and Council to endorse a slight change to the grants application process under public participation engagement to allow the various community associations to apply and receive funding for their ongoing community engagement. Okay?
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Do you want to come up to just if there's crossover questions?
I like this one as an ending. Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success.
Go, especially for everybody that owns a Ford. All right, so we do have some questions.
Richter Daily, right?
Yeah. First off, Councillor Richter.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. Barb, you mentioned that there'd be a slight change to the grants application process. What is that slight change? Is it just a wording change?
I see it as just the wording change to add in people can apply for activities under the public engagement process, because there's supposed to be some funding there for that, but there doesn't seem to be any direct link on how to get that.
Yeah.
So that would be one way to do it, or to just look at sort of a more holistic way of looking at the interpretation of the grants application process, and actually allow things like the work that these community associations do. They could file them under individual projects all the way along, if that's the case. So for some reason they've been turned down, and it just doesn't make sense, especially in this day and age of communication, right?
Yeah, I know in the past we tended to fund events, but I was at the Brookswood Fernrich the other night, and they had RCMP officers there talking about Block Watch.
Right.
They had township planning staff talking
Right.
about the new OCP. So that's an education thing, which
Yeah.
I think is good. And I know the Willoughby Community
Yeah,
Association,
they do
they're
too.
doing the same thing with
So it's for
having the
Langley?
RCMP out.
Yeah, the way I see it is that the way grants are set up now, that if you have a project, the township will fund the project, but they won't fund the ongoing activities of a community association. So that's why we fell off, because we have many little projects, we don't have one large project.
Maybe that's it. And that's why I say it could be individual projects that could all be put into a final sort of report to council, or
a portfolio or something like that. So how much, in the past, you said you'd been
They had
able to get
2,500.
2,500? Is that what you're asking for again?
Yes, it
to get
is.
the
Yep.
2,500?
Maximum.
Yep.
Maximum?
Yep.
And you would like the different little events to count as much as a big event does. Now, you mentioned that you network with each other, or the different groups. I'm amazed to see there's 6 groups. That's amazing. That's really good news.
That's unheard of,
Yeah.
actually. This is really new for municipalities. It's exciting.
I had the pleasure of talking to the person from the Langley Meadows Community Association today.
Oh, okay.
Which I didn't know there was.
So we have another, so we've actually got 7.
Yeah, there are people on the Grove that have had interest, but
Yep.
we'll see.
Now, do the groups, when they're networking, they help each other out? Do they share common interests at all, or? Yeah?
Yeah, we've been communicating since October, and we've been talking about different kind of social media aspects, and also what kind of activities we could do, but it's new. It's new, and
So they're working through some of it,
We're
yeah.
working some of it through our
But the terms
community,
of reference are there for each of the communities as well, so, yeah, pretty exciting.
Well, I agree with what you said when you opened up. I think this is one of the best good news stories we've had in Langley in a long time because there's so much talking
Yeah.
going on. That's great. Thank you for coming out.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming. I was taken back by your slide that said that you weren't eligible, because I don't believe that's the case. The grant criteria, which is right in front of me, says township grants are awarded to nonprofit groups, organizations serving the municipality and its residences. So ongoing funding for operations, that I don't think is a grant criteria that we allow on any application. But in terms of a series of events that you want to host, and if it involves a number of residents in the township, I think you would be eligible. So I encourage you to make application, and maybe we'll have some more input from staff at a future date.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that you're correct on that. And I don't mean to upset everybody here, but there's no way that we turned you down unless you didn't,
Somebody misunderstood.
Yeah, there could be a misunderstanding here.
Well, yeah, you know, we're kind of like a square in a round hole in the sense that we need to file for a specific project, and community organizations, associations are an ongoing endeavor, and we do have operational costs that do foster the communication, that do bring everything together, and we have our website costs and all those things, and that's what we're looking for.
Okay, well, I'm glad you've mentioned that, because that is the main reason that this criteria exists, because we have dozens of other groups that do apply and receive the $2,500 special events and project grant, but they don't get ongoing funding for operations. So if we were to introduce that as you're requesting, I'm afraid we'd have to do that with a lot of other groups as well, numbers of groups, the quilters and weavers, everybody, they all have administrative and ongoing expenses. But anyway, I don't want to dampen the evening.
I know, I
but
don't think that's the case, though.
I think we are very close to being on the correct page anyway, and they might have to do a little more effort into creating a work plan for the year and include that perhaps in the grant application. But
I
we'll see.
think though too that we're, you know, those other people that you give the grants to, they're not in communication with the township, and they're not fostering more involvement by the community of residents to become more involved in their affairs of the township, right? And so in that sense, it's a little bit different. I'm almost thinking that it should be a different classification in terms of
the
community.
public participation. I think the
Well,
engagement process could
I
really
think you
carry
might
over.
have noticed, and the rest of council will know, that we've reviewed the grant process many times. So if it requires some more refining, I'm sure we can
Just
look
want to
into it.
clarify, Councillor Long, they were denied last year, I think it was?
Yeah, both of us were denied.
Yeah, they were denied last year.
But
So that's why we're here tonight.
Yes,
is
so
because
if
of
your
that.
application didn't include specific events and projects, then that
It was the same as before.
yeah. Okay, well, anyway, we'll look into it.
Well, we
for
can
sure.
make sure that we can put some of those events more clearly, because you'll see from the PowerPoint, I've actually listed some of the things that they covered, and there are clearly events in there. And so we can easily put those in the grant application process. But what I'm hearing is that sounds like there's a good possibility that you would fund these.
It may already exist in our current
Yeah.
criteria and just require some communication. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation and for all the information. I haven't had really time to digest
just
this
put it
part,
in.
obviously, but actually there's some things that really leap out at me. So I made some notes while you were speaking, and I think what's really relevant to what you're bringing forward, I think that there's an incredible synergy that you're talking about that's now going on, and this is something that is very useful, and I think very much in keeping with our engagement strategy. The engagement strategy, I thought, was a huge step forward in the township of Langley. But we have to try, I think, and evolve our processes in order to keep pace with that expectation and the realization of the fact that, as you pointed out, we have a number of volunteers in our community that are wanting to work alongside and to provide information to the township. That's not only very timely, but it's information that I think from grassroots perspective that we wouldn't necessarily otherwise get. I'm not saying that we're lacking in information, but I think it's a kind of information that's very valuable for us. And, you know, just the number of different groups that are coming together, I think is very impressive. I did have a question actually, though, when I read the first delegation request, and I wondered if the kind of research that you did had identified from other communities what kind of funding envelopes are actually giving monies towards these
I
efforts.
thought at the back of this report, there are some links I've set up. I've also sent it on a link system, so you could just click on it on a computer. But as an example, I'll go in the very first one there. The District of North Vancouver directly funds neighborhood groups such as this for, you know, engagement. It actually says that right on the District of North Vancouver site. So, but you would still be very leading edge. Because, you know, I'm looking at Chilliwack and Abbotsford as a couple of other communities that do it to some degree, but you still would be very leading edge, because why not be? I mean, you were pretty leading edge in the public engagement process. This just aligns itself so perfectly with it. It just, to my mind, just is like a marriage. It's just going to mold together and work together to have everything, you know, copacetic, hopefully, down the road.
Well, just briefly to follow up on that comment, I do see that this is very integral to our whole strategy, and I don't know if we have any funds left from that strategy. I mean, there's different ways, as they say, more than one way to skin a cat. You know, it could be that we could change the language of our actual program, but it could also be that we decide that we want to create a special category that more captures what it is that you're doing, rather than to trying to get you to fit into our community grant system.
Or peg ground hole, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But that's why I suggested kind of the public engagement process, because it can be added on. It's kind of missing where it goes to. It's just got the charter, and then there's like no kind of flow chart.
Bit of a gap. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thank you so much for coming today and talking through this with us. And could you, just before I had a question I wanted to ask you, but could you just remind me of who are the 6 different community associations? I have 5 down. I missed one somewhere.
It's the...
It's the Aldergrove,
Yep.
Yes.
Brookswood,
Yep.
Fort Langley.
I think Milner's not on there. I think Milner's not on my list.
Oh, Milner.
Yes.
That's the one I'm missing. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
I missed one somewhere along the way. I'm just wondering, like so the community associations are formed. I know some are newer, some have been around for a number of years, and they are, you know, a group of individuals from those communities interested in seeing their community grow and develop. What is it possible that a community could have more than one community association? They could have 2 or 3 community associations in the same community? Are there any limitations that would prevent that from occurring?
I haven't seen that, though.
Yeah, I mean, that would be duplication of efforts, and I would think that, you know, you'd have one community association per community that it becomes a bit more focused, but if you have a separation of the
I haven't
two,
seen it.
Yeah, that would
So-
You haven't seen that before?
Well, I haven't even seen that in my experience in North Van, where
Right,
they
okay.
split off, right? There will be the Grand Boulevard Community Association, the Lower Lonsdale Community, but they don't, like, there's not 2 Lower Lonsdale kind of
Yeah,
thing, so
yeah.
I haven't seen that here either, so.
If one was too big and residents didn't feel that they were getting proper feedback from their community association, they might split off into a smaller group.
Right, okay, so I guess it's possible, but it's unlikely that
Likely.
we would see that,
Very unlikely, yeah.
certainly in groups that are
You're seeing double
small today.
applications, right?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm just, you know, the group kind of forms and sort of starts to speak on behalf of the members of their community.
Yeah.
And, you know, what's to say that another group couldn't form and be representing their community, and another group form and represent their community, and they might have differing perspectives or views. And so I guess I was just trying to get a sense of what happens in other communities. Is there
I haven't seen
that, or is it just, you know, normally one group kind of representing one area?
Councillor Whitmarsh, I think what would happen if that did occur, and I would never say never that it wouldn't, I haven't seen it, but I would suspect that there would be incredible efforts by the current or existing community association to work with that other one to find out if there's some coming together of meeting of the minds of the 2 of them to just have the one or just work together. So it doesn't seem to be a difficult task if that was to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, they seem to be pretty good at making, opening up to all the different points of view, so.
One other word I heard used in the presentation, I'm not sure who used it, was that these groups are non-political. I'm just wondering how you would define non-political. Particularly, I also think, I certainly understand politics as it relates to maybe councillors or mayor sitting on council, but I'm also wondering about the different associations that are coming together, working together, but on the other hand, they do have at times, could have competing interests for funds, particularly between maybe Fort Langley Community Association and Aldergrove Community Association. They're in some sense maybe looking for similar funds or things. I'm just wondering sort of the idea of non-political, what that sort of means, if that's written to the association's bylaws, or is it written into their understanding that they're somehow non-political?
Yeah, for a community association to actually say that they represent or that they stand for something or that they're moving forward on a particular issue, they really have to have some numbers behind them to say that the residents are believing that. I don't think community associations are really in a position to move forward an issue unless it really is a good groundswell from the residents. And then and that's the problem with the Township of Langley, is that we're all these different communities, and we all end up competing, or sometimes we're feeling that council is dividing and conquering us, and all that kind of thing. And we really need to bring the township together so that we're not a bunch of little separate communities, but we're actually one community.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's good input. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Councillor Qualley.
Thanks for being here. I appreciate the outreach. I think this has been an objective for this council the entire term, was to increase our community engagement. And I think there's always an opportunity in a face-to-face engagement that you can't get online. And hopefully the level of respectful communication that happens face-to-face is obviously much different than the kind of dialogue that happens occasionally on social media. So I would appreciate an opportunity to have lots of higher level conversations than we can have through social media. The thing about the grant criteria is that, the community groups that apply still have to send in the results and how they use the money, and we're still accountable at the end of the day to you, to me as taxpayers. We all pay these taxes and want to make sure that the money is being used properly. So I wonder how we could measure that, have some sort of accountability structure and how the money's used. And it's what you're talking about, I think, has tons of merit, but I think we have to figure out what this is going to look like moving forward, because you have to have criteria to apply and criteria to follow up to make sure the money is actually being used for the intended purposes. So how do you suggest that?
I strongly agree with that. When I came on the board of the Fort Langley Community Association, we hadn't really applied for a grant because we had other funds. And then we had spent the money, and then I found out after the fact, because I never had put in an application for the community grant before, that it was done 2 or 3 years previously, that should have been reported. And so that was an education on our part.
Yeah.
And I think that that there is an education to community associations as they grow and mature, that they need to understand that there is a reporting, there is accountability back to Township Council, and that it would be something that should be strongly emphasized, and that, in my mind, that needs to be done.
Yes, it's creating some, some expectations from everybody, so it's really clear how the money's to be used and what it's used for. Because the other community groups, you talked about other mechanisms of fundraising. We actually charge the other community groups to find other mechanisms of fundraising, that this community grant can't be the only source of income for them, so they need to have other things. And I know there's membership fees and advertising on your website and things you can do to raise money externally. So I don't think you're as far away as you think from the community grant application process. I think identifying some purposes or some specific purposes around the application, I think you could fit maybe within the existing criteria that, if you haven't before, staff, has evaluated based on the application, which is all they can do, right, is evaluate the application as they come in. So, yeah, I appreciate the outreach. I think if there's an opportunity for council and our community and staff in our community to have better facilitated dialogue, I think we all will benefit from that for sure.
Councillor Quayle, in addition, if you look at the project eligibility, you'll see there's applications or funding must demonstrate benefit to the township. This does that. It must involve local residents. It does that. Must be held in the township. It does that. Must promote the identity of Langley. It does that. And enhance the quality of life for township residents, which it does all of those things already. So there's so much of what these groups already do. And if you have an opportunity to go through the slides individually, you'll see a lot of the things that I listed there as well. And they're more than prepared to submit to the council so that the council can see what the money's spent on. And you can be guaranteed, for example, that the money that the council did give to the groups here before, it's not paying for me tonight. That's a totally separate thing. So I want to make sure that you don't think that that's the kind of thing that they're spending the money on either. So,
well, I think, you know, that investment in bringing groups together, I think, is a decent investment. So
some people might not.
So I'm not questioning that use of funds necessarily, but I think the same level of accountability and it has to be, you know, made for everybody. And council doesn't vet all these applications.
I know.
They go to staff and if they check boxes and if they, you know, check the boxes and they're all checked, then they're given a grant. They don't, for political reasons, they don't come to us to say, well, I really like these people. And I know they didn't meet the criteria, but they're so nice.
Oh, yeah, no.
So that's why it goes, it's a formula and staff checks the boxes so that it doesn't come back to us for that kind of...
Your favorite pet project.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah,
so
no, totally.
Once the application process is set and the criteria is set, staff is, you know, literally checking following the policy. So anyhow, thanks for bringing this forward. I think there's probably a pathway we can find.
I'm sure there is. Yep.
Yeah,
it'll be
so
great.
thanks.
It'd be very exciting. I think it's like really big news for the township council to be doing something like this. Pretty exciting.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, just a clarification, and I think you touched on it when you said that the groups had got turned down this year for the grant process.
And the year before, I believe, 2 years. Yep, 2
but
years.
The Fort Langley Community Association, didn't they do like a wonderful survey not that long ago with all kinds of information, and it was a statistically significant sample, or pretty big sample anyway. Yeah. And you brought that information forward to council, and I think that's how we found out about 96th Avenue.
Well, yeah, it supported 96th Avenue, and it supports the trucking, you know, changing the truck route, and there's a few other things that have come up that, you know, that we'd like to bring back to you in the next few weeks. We had, like I said, we had excess funds because we had funds from other sources, so we hadn't made an application in 2 years. Yeah. And then we did the survey, and I think that same year we put in the application, we were turned down because we had not identified one single project. We identified who we were, what we were doing, how we were engaging with the community, and with what we engaged with the community. And that didn't work. And so to have to make us sit down and maybe create one project that's going to...
Or several.
Or several, but then, you know, I mean, every time that we want to do a thing for it, because there's a developer in the fort that wants to do something, and we put on a little bit of an open house for him, and residents can come and question him in a very casual, non-confrontational manner, and you know, it works, but, you know, how do I, you know, like, am I going to put a cost to that? Like, okay, that was $100. You know, that's what I'm looking for, is that we be able to carry on our business, which is the business of the township, on an ongoing basis, and that will benefit council and us as residents.
So, and I recall you saying too, it was your plan to keep that survey going.
Yeah.
And I mean, the information that comes out of surveys like that, and we all know that people's focuses change over time, and topical issues up there, I can think of right off the... do we want a boutique hotel in Fort Langley? Do we want to underground the wires? You know, like, there's... It would be helpful. And the first survey that you did you get a grant to pay for that?
We had that was the year that we had leftover funds. That was the first one. The second year, we funded ourselves. We raised money from private citizens. And the third year, we actually went to another committee or group in Fort Langley, and they funded us on that. And it costs about $1,300 to do the survey. But we're, you know, Fort Langley is, you know, we're such an identifiable area and small that we actually go out and hand out the surveys residentially to every household, and we can do that. Other community groups might do something totally different. But we wanted to, because for us, we wanted to be able to say that, come to you and say, listen, the survey says this. It's not us, it's not my view, it's the residents of the township that is saying that, or in Fort Langley. So at least then it's something that's got some meat to it.
Yeah.
And it's not a political agenda that, you know, I want to get this through, or I'm opposed to this personally, but it's more, this is what people are saying.
Yeah.
And so that's why we want to continue that.
I think there's lots of value in
Yeah.
information like
sometimes
that,
there's
for
stuff
sure.
there that some of the directors don't agree with, but we move forward on it.
One last question. On the delegation that talks about, it talks about the Langley Community Associations, which I assume is like the umbrella of all of them.
Yeah,
Is there a formal umbrella,
No,
or
it's
is
not-
it just
it's
a
not
Still
coalition?
informal,
It's still informal.
but they have come up with a name, so
Yeah.
we're one step closer to formalizing it.
So will it be formalized at some point?
Yeah, we're moving towards it. I mean, like, we started discussions in October, and
Already here?
we've had 2 meetings since then, and it started off with really Willoughby, Brookswood, and myself, or Fort Langley, and we're coming up. You know, it's if we formalize TOLCA, you know, Township of Langley Community Association, TOLCA, into and create a society out of it, we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, then we'll have to come ask for funding.
I did want to just mention, Councillor Richter, one more thing about the funding. As we all know, just like in any community, certain communities have more access to local money than others. So I wouldn't want to feel like one community association might be forced to raise the same amount as another community association, that kind of thing. I
Yeah,
want to
there's
be
got to
careful
be
about
equity.
setting that up.
Yeah.
Because some got, you know, access in a much quicker manner because of that community's wealthier than another community, so.
And too, you know, like when you think of the other types of grants, there are festivals and you know, and they have access to gaming grants. I'm working on a jazz festival for Fort Langley. We're looking at, you know, BC grants and things like that. And so there's a lot more money available for that kind of thing. Community associations don't have a lot of flair. And, you know,
Time to get
there's
there.
things that you can't really pin it on. So it's a little bit harder to raise funds. And so that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Well, good job, thank you.
Time is time.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Al will tell you about the Langley Meadows Community Association that came to council many, many years ago, and so they've been around a long time.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes, just a couple of quick questions. What is sort of the typical length of term for members when is it like a 1-year membership, a 5-year, what are they?
So, I mean, in terms of memberships?
Yeah, when people join your association, is it like a 1-year sort of term?
We've had members that are being, you know, there for many, many years.
Are you
Right.
looking for funding, you mean?
No, I guess I was thinking when people join, do they pay an annual fee? Is it once a year they pay a fee?
Yeah,
Or do they sign up for
actually-
5 years and they're now a member for 5 years? or-
The Fort Langley Community Association doesn't charge. We did charge.
Some do, though.
And we found it, we didn't raise a lot of money that way.
Okay.
Brookswood does charge. I think they have $10 for a fee. That would be for 1 year, and I'm not quite sure for the rest.
Okay, that
It
was my other
varies.
question, just was what the membership fees were. So they vary from
Oh, yeah.
0 to
Yes.
high as 10?
Yeah,
Is
maybe,
that sort of
yeah.
a high?
Yeah.
5.
There you go.
Okay.
That's Brookswood? Brookswood is 5? Is that the highest?
Don't know, can't say for sure.
No one knows for sure? Okay, so
Yeah.
0 to 5 in that range, okay. Willoughby's 5, so
There you go.
thank you. That's an annual.
We're all over the place out there.
All right, thank you.
So I have a couple questions. Number one, I don't see any rural representation. Being one of the people in this council that's in a unique situation and living in the middle of nowhere, we have issues too, and I don't see any representation from the rural community? Aldergrove, the Aldergrove Community Association is Aldergrove. That's not rural, that's an urban. So I'm talking about South Langley, I'm talking about Glen Valley, I'm talking about a number of other areas which in effect are exclusively rural and exclusively have issues associated with it. It's an observation.
Can we ask if there is one? I guess, is there one? Yeah.
Fort Langley, actually, we go from 216th all the way to the township border. So we cover all the Glen Valley,
Okay,
and we
the
go from the
color.
Fraser River down to the freeway.
Okay,
That's how we see Fort Langley, because a lot of people that live out in Glen Valley, they pick up their mail in Fort Langley.
Right.
They think of themselves as living in Fort Langley, so we try and encompass everybody.
there you go.
Yes, sir.
The second thing was, and it was an observation I had when the terms of reference, and I just, because it's most recent, with the Aldergrove Community Association, I think they had 6 terms of reference when they published them. And I looked at the terms of reference, and one of them, for example, was to deal with the business association in the downtown core. I'm not exactly sure how it was worded and so on. And it immediately struck me that we have the ABA. So are we stepping on each other's toes here? What happens if the ABA has a project and now it comes forth, or Birchen Creek enhancement, because one of them was related to environmental? So there are a myriad of other groups out there, community associations being one of them, but sometimes they can be, cross paths and cross purposes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kask, I'm talking to these two, and you're, unfortunately, you're not part of the delegation, so I got to call the rules of order here. But my point is that sometimes there's conflicting interests in the community, and I only chose that one because it's the most recent. But the point of the matter is that, in effect, we could be put, the adjudicators of grants, could be put into a situation where we have to make a selection between one project, which is not a community association, but is an association representing community, for example, the business community, or an ecological group, or a transportation group, or whatever has a special interest. And so it's one of the, I guess, scenarios where we have to be very cautious, because if we put money towards a community association, are we doing it at the exclusivity of other groups, not necessarily associations, but working groups in a community that have a valued project, idea, activity, function in a community? And I'm just throwing that out as a caution, as something to think about, because if we give $500, let's just say, I'm just picking a number, I'm not saying anything, to one group, do we have to then give it to every group that applies that may have met those criteria of a project, whatever the case may be? So we got to be very careful and cautious, because it could soon run up to 15, 20 groups who all have an interest in something in the community.
I guess what I'm asking for is that the township recognize community associations as being for each area in the township.
Right.
And that in Fort Langley, we have the Fort Langley BIA.
That's right.
Which is self-funded. They do their assessment every
Yeah.
year, and they do their projects. And there's some correlation between us and the BIA, but we don't really, we are, as a community association, have concerns about certain things on the commercial side, like the truck route and stuff like that, and we've worked together with the BIA, or the BIA has made us aware about different things, and then we stepped forward and we came to council on that. So you need to work together.
I totally agree.
I mean, I like to think of bringing people together and groups together instead of trying to be, going against fighting over funding. But if the township would say that, we should have a community association in every area, that would, sort of funnel that type of funding through, that in some kind of structure that makes sure that it works, then that's what my goal would be.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing, Acting Mayor Fox, is This whole idea of a business association representing citizens in their engagement process and being engaged with the issues overall doesn't mesh completely, because in fact the businesses will have their own issues to deal with, and the citizens engagement process, which will have all the the various issues that citizens are interested in, which might include business. And incidentally, the Aldergrove Business Association and the Aldergrove Community Association have met, just so you're aware of that. But they may have completely separate views. So what we're looking for is for the citizen representation, which might mean working with the business association or whoever else is out there. These groups have been so successful at coming together on their own that they're going to be just even more successful with bringing together a lot of the other groups. So that's why it's so important that we can move forward on letting them do some of that for you, for all of you.
It's just a caution, and it's part of the discussion moving forward. Now, Councillor Richter, you have a question, but you've already had two. There is a limit.
Delegations, aren't they?
Well,
We're not limited
yeah,
to
but
only
speaking
speaking
twice.
twice. Okay. It was just a clarification, and I think the argument you're throwing out about these groups getting to be at cross purposes may be a moot point, because we have a long history in this community of supporting community groups that come forward with events that they want to have supported. And I'll use Aldergrove as an example. I mean, they are absolutely brilliant in how they all pull together to support events like the Aldergrove Agricultural Fair, and there will be a number of different community groups in Aldergrove that will each apply for funding for a specific event. Maybe it's a jumpy castle, or maybe it's the petting zoo, or so I actually don't think that these groups would ever be at loggerheads with each other. I think they probably end up working more collaboratively than anything else.
Can I quickly comment on that? I think that the community groups need to be an amalgamation of that, and that I can remember in the mid-90s, this is going back to Mayor Schulten's, that he had these community groups in place. The Fort Langley community group at that time, I think it was called FLEC or FLEA or some
FLEC.
Yeah, some, but I remember going there, but it was made up of different parts of the community, and everybody, different parts of the community had representation there. And there used to be there'd either be a sitting councillor there, or there was somebody from the township planning department there, so that it was really became inclusive and enhances. And when we have our meetings, lots of times I get people coming in and they're asking questions. Well, what are the rules about movies, or what about noise, or what about this or that? So I take those questions, and then I go through the website and I try and find the answer, and then I get back to them. But it would be nice that if the community associations actually had somebody that, oh, okay, I've got that question, then the next morning I make a call to township to that person and say, this is, these questions came up. I'd like to get back to those residents on those questions. Like, who do I talk to? And that kind of liaison, that kind of development could happen. That would be great. But that's what we're trying to do here.
Can I just tell you something that maybe some of you on council aren't aware? I'm a third-generation Vancouverite who's lived in Vancouver, North Vancouver, and Langley. And when I was looking to move, I only looked at Langley Township. Just, interesting enough, because I, in all my experience and years in local government, had seen Langley as a community of communities. I'd seen it as a place where I wanted to put some roots down and actually come and live by choice. And I haven't experienced any difference since then. I found you are a community of communities, and that's why I'm so excited about this coming together of the communities themselves, because it's part of why I came here in the first place. It just is expanding itself and becoming even better. So, and I have the mayor and his worship and council members to thank for that, because of that process that you implemented with that whole public engagement and everything, and getting people involved and taking that leadership role and doing that. So I just can't say anything more. It's just so
well,
good.
That's an excellent way to close. Thank you
Yes.
very much. Oh, Do you want a question?
I just wanted to make a comment to your comment about being able to pick up the phone. I hope you know you can do that now.
Yes,
That you can
you
call
can.
anyone inside the municipality
Or
and
you
get the
guys.
information you're looking for, call council and ask.
Yeah.
But I mean, staff are very good about, you don't need an assigned person that you can speak to. You can call any department and get information.
But
Okay.
I'm just referring back to, referring back to what we did in the 90s. And
Yeah.
the communication was a lot easier, and sometimes the website's not that easy to find who to talk to.
Yeah.
And so just to have somebody on the inside that I can send an email to, or, these are the things that come up, instead of, me going to phone 3 different departments, or, so who does the movies, or,
There was probably several hundred fewer people working in the township back
That's
then.
probably
But,
true.
Yeah.
but yeah,
Okay.
they're very accommodating about
No,
information.
they are,
Yeah.
yes.
One more question. Councillor Arneson, and that's it.
Last
Thank you.
word, thank you.
We flagged enough.
I have to say that prior to being elected to council, I went to many of the Fort Langley Community Association meetings. And what I found from that, actually, I think in a way, was somewhat of a precursor or a connection to the fact of the engagement process itself, because it was really interesting to go there and have a developer, proponent, or some details about things that otherwise, as a community member, you wouldn't really have any further details about. So to me, it was just a stellar example of what that can do, because I always came away with this feeling. Unfortunately, you have them now on nights I can't come, like Monday nights. But, yeah, that's true. But for me, I found it very valuable, and I also did come away with the feeling that it was very broad-based. We were talking about, is it political or not? It really is a way to capture more or less the priorities of that community, and I do think that it's beautifully orchestrated as between the different organizations, because I certainly don't see them as being competing, but I think it's a very helpful model. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much for coming. Great. Good. So move along to section